So, hello then, welcome back to yet another Night of the Movies podcast. I'm Spike Knight, and in these podcasts, I talk all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I am reviewing the new musical adaptation of Mean Girls. But just before I do that, I should say what I say of every podcast I do, which is, if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, hello to my viewers, but prefer to listen to your podcast on Spotify, well, as you can also listen to the podcast on Spotify at Night of the Movies on that platform. And if you are already listening to this podcast on Spotify, hello there to podcast listeners, then you can also check out this podcast visually. Yes, you can watch this podcast on my YouTube channel at Night of the Movies on that platform as well. Likewise, wherever you may be watching or listening to this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the podcast, of course, and please leave me with some feedback on things to improve on in future podcasts, because there are always things to improve on, and feedback is, as ever, much appreciated. So, let's get into it. Mean Girls. So, from what I found out online, and I don't know how true this is, but according to The Independent, this 2024 version of Mean Girls is based on a stage show, which is based on the 2004 Mean Girls movie, the original Mean Girls film, which is based on a book. Therefore, from what I also understand, this version of Mean Girls that I'm reviewing in this podcast today is a new musical take on Mean Girls that is based on a stage musical production that already exists. However, I was not aware of that stage musical production until a couple of days ago before seeing this film. Also, from what I've heard, I'm not sure if this is true, so do correct me if I'm wrong, but Tina Fey wrote the book that the original 2004 Mean Girls film was based on, and then she wrote the script for the original Mean Girls film, and she returned to write the script for this new version of Mean Girls. So she's very much involved in it, and also she does play Katie's teacher in the original version of Mean Girls, and she reprises the role here. So that's what I understand this film to be. It's a adaptation of the stage musical production of Mean Girls, and I had no plan to see this film, because before Christmas, when I saw trailers for this film in the cinema, it looked awful. It looked absolutely terrible. I was thinking, why the hell is this film happening? Why the hell is it coming out? And I kept seeing the trailer for, and it kept making me not want to watch it. But for some reason yesterday, I was in a weird mood. And when I say I was in a weird mood, I mean I was in a weird mood where for some reason I decided to go to the cinema to see this film. I think it's because I wanted to go to the cinema, but there was nothing out that really interested me, and I thought, well, Mean Girls, I like the original film quite a bit. The original film, I don't love it like some people do, but I think I watched it for the first time last year, and I found it wildly entertaining, hilariously funny, and very enjoyable to watch. And it's surprisingly slick, well directed, and very well written. It's a really great comedy that still stands the test of time. It was made 20 years ago now, and it's still great today. So that's another reason I was thinking, why the hell are we getting this film? But I wanted to go and see it anyway, because I thought, Mean Girls, it could be good, and Tina Fey's behind it, and I really like Tina Fey. Not only her work on the first Mean Girls, but also she was the person behind 30 Rock. And 30 Rock is one of the best sitcoms I have seen ever. It's insanely good, that show. So yeah, when I heard Tina Fey was behind it, I was like, okay, I'm going to give it a shot. It's something I can review on this channel, and that's exactly what I'm doing now. So, having seen the film, here are my thoughts on this new version of Mean Girls. Honestly, I think it's fine. It's not terrible, and there's nothing offensively bad about this film. I didn't come out of the cinema absolutely hating it, and feeling like I'd wasted... Actually, I take that back. I did feel like I wasted 2 hours of my life, because it's just under 2 hours. So when you add in the adverts, it's just over 2 hours. So I did feel like I'd wasted around about 2 hours of my life. That being said, I have had worse times watching films in the cinema over the past couple of years. And even though this is quite a tedious watch, even so I barely found any enjoyment in watching this film, you can tell that they're making it with the best intentions, and you can tell that the people on the screen and that the people behind the screen, you can feel that watching this film, they're trying their best to update this story for a modern audience. I'm not sure if it needed to be updated, because like I said, I watched the original Mean Girls film last year for the first time. I remember people going on about it. I remember people going on about it in secondary school and college, and I just never thought it was going to be my sort of thing. And then I watched it for the first time last year, and I really, really, really liked it. And so if you can hear some sawing in the background, by the way, my neighbours having work done to the house. They're always having work done to the house. But anyway, going back onto what I was saying, I'm not sure the story needed modernising, but I get what they were going for. I'm not sure if this take was needed at all, but at least it felt like it was made with the best intentions. And people on the screen, the actors in the film seemed to be enjoying the parts they were playing. Also, and this sword getting really annoying right now. Also, there was a couple of moments I chuckled in the film. And like I said before, it's not terrible, but it also isn't anything special, and I can't seem to have the same life that the original Mean Girls movie has had. That original Mean Girls film is ingrained into the pop culture zeitgeist. There's so many people I watch online who still quote lines from the film, and who still talk about Regina George and all that sort of stuff. And I can't imagine the same happening with this version of Mean Girls. It feels like it's trying to recapture that lightning in the bottle that the original Mean Girls film had. It feels like it's trying to recapture that. And I'm not really sure why. I keep going back to this. I'm not sure why this film exists. I've got 3 big problems with this film. My first big problem is that it doesn't feel needed or relevant. And I'm not, as I already mentioned, I'm not sure why it exists. I keep saying that. I'm not sure why it really exists. And I'll get onto that in more detail very, very shortly. My second big problem is that it's just not that funny, which is a real disappointment to say, because it's written by Tina Fey, who is the person behind 30 Rock, one of the best sitcoms ever. But this isn't that funny. And my third big problem with it is that it feels like a stage production. It feels like it was... The funny thing is, I was watching the film thinking, if I saw the stage production, if I saw the musical production on stage, I would probably quite enjoy it. That's what I was feeling like watching this film. But because I was in the cinema, I was expecting more of a film experience, if you follow my thinking. And I was expecting more of a cinematic experience. That's what I should have said there. I was expecting more of a cinematic experience. And this film didn't give that to me. In fact, it reminded me of when I watched Horrid Henry the movie at a much younger age than I am now. And I didn't really like that film, and I still don't now. This film was nowhere near as bad as Horrid Henry the movie, but I remember watching that and thinking, this feels like it's a production from a college or university. It's a big budget production from a college or university, and it doesn't really feel like it needed to be on film. And this film doesn't really feel like it's been taken from stage production to film particularly well. It doesn't feel like much has been changed. It just feels like it's there. And again, that's going back onto my first big problem that I have with this film. Why does it exist? I understand that there is a stage musical production. I get that, and I get the whole idea of wanting to transport it to the bigger screen, wanting to transport it to the silver screen, as they say, and potentially get new audiences watching the film, and maybe introduce the Mean Girls IP to a new audience. But I would argue, again, that the original film is still relevant, and that didn't need to be done. That this new musical remake doesn't need to be out there. And I get the argument that, yes, we want to transport it from stage musical production to film, because why not? because that has happened in the past with the likes of Hairspray and the producers, and worked, to varying degrees of success. But at the same time, I would argue that there's a Back to the Future the musical on out right now. You can go and watch it. I don't know where people watch a musical. I go watch it at the theatre. I couldn't think of the word there. You can go and watch Back to the Future the musical at the theatre right now. I think it's still out. And the thing is, we don't have a Back to the Future the musical movie, do we? And I might be eating my words up in the next 5 years, but I don't reckon we're going to get one. And the reason I brought up that is because we're not got a Back to the Future the musical movie, because we don't need it. Why then did we need a Mean Girls musical movie? I still don't get why. I really don't get it. This film didn't give me a reason, didn't make me go, oh, that's why you've done this now. That's why you're releasing this at this point, and that's why 20 years later you've changed up the story. And it didn't give me a reason to go, oh yeah, I get why this film exists. If anything, it just confused me, because songs are not memorable. None of them are bangers. None of them are hits. None of them I played on Spotify coming back from the cinema, on the bus from the cinema. I remember going watching Wonka before Christmas, and on the way back from seeing Wonka, I was playing the songs from that film on the bus on the way home. And I didn't do that though with Mean Girls. And I think the test of a good musical is, do you want to listen to the songs after? Do you want to listen to the music after? And I have no interest in listening to the songs and the music from this Mean Girls remake at all. And it's a full-on musical, by the way, if people don't realise. I don't think the trailers are really advertised as a full-on musical. No, it's a full-on musical, and the musical sequences have something to them. They're not terrible, but they feel like the parts of the film that the director focused on the most. Or the directors' names here, I can't find their names, but it doesn't really matter. They're two first-time directors, and the thing is, you can tell this is from first-time directors. And I don't mean that in a bad way, because they do a good job. Well, I don't mean it in a bad way, but I also don't mean it in a great way. They don't do a bad job with the musical sequences. They try to add something to them, and you have swirling and swishing, I don't know if that's a word even, but you have all of this camera movement going on during the musical sequences, and they're not badly staged. But then the moments and the sequences and the scenes in between all the musical sequences don't really have that good direction to them. It felt like a lot of the effort with the directing of this film was put into the musical sequences, and you can tell that, again, they're well choreographed, well staged, well done. They feel like they've been put a lot of effort into them. The musical sequences work to a degree whilst you're watching them. Again, I don't think the songs are particularly catchy or memorable, but they're well done. However, the rest of the film felt like it didn't have any joy or excitement in there. It didn't feel like it had any flavour to it, like the original Mean Girls film did. And I didn't believe in any of this film. I didn't believe in any of it because I did not think it was well directed, and I did not think the storytelling was well done. I felt the writing this time, although it's not, from what I remember, and again, so if you can hear some sound interference from outside, from what I remember, it's not that different than the original Mean Girls, even though it's not that different. Even so, the writing isn't that different, and the jokes aren't that different. A lot of it just felt stale, and I didn't believe in it. I remember watching the original Mean Girls movie last year, and even so, many of the actors involved in that film have become huge now, like Rachel McAdams, like Amanda Seyfried, and like Lindsay Lohan. Even so, those actors have become household names now, arguably. I was watching that film, and it felt real. It felt like I was watching these real characters, this real secondary school, or this real high school in America. It felt real. Yet, none of this film felt real. It felt like I was watching actors in a stage production. And that's going back onto problem number 3, which I'll get onto shortly again in this review. It didn't give me a reason for it to exist. And I wanted that from it, because the original film didn't come out that long ago. It came out 20 years ago. And it kind of reminded me of the Lion King remake, which came out in 2019. You know, you're watching that, you're thinking, okay, it's fine, and I like what they've done with the CGI, it's quite impressive, but it's exactly the same story. Why are we just telling the story 20 years like? Why are we telling the story 20 years later? I don't understand. Why now? And I felt the same way with this film. Although it is different than the original, I don't feel the changes justify its existence. That's what I was trying to get to there. I don't feel the changes justify its existence. I came with that on the spot. I was quite proud of that. Anyway, going on to problem number 2. It's not that funny. And I'm really sad to say that because, again, it's from Tina Fey, person behind 30 Rock, loved 30 Rock, and I loved Tina Fey's script for the original film. But I chuckled a couple of times. I'll say that. I did chuckle and smile to myself a couple of times in the film. But the secret to comedy, you know, is 1, 2, 3, timing. That is the secret to comedy. And the timing with the comedic delivery and the timing with the direction of the comedy is not that well done in this film. You know, I was thinking a lot about Bottoms, which came out last year, which was like, it was almost like an updated version of Mean Girls, you know. I mean, a new take on the whole Mean Girls idea, which I really, really liked. Bottoms was one of the biggest surprises, one of the most pleasant surprises of last year. And that was a film that was really funny because the directing was on point. It's difficult to direct comedy. I understand that, and it's difficult to have good comedic delivery. But I was watching this film and I was thinking, Bottoms did it so well. Why is this film struggling? Why is this film not having that same laugh, that same, I don't know what I'm trying to say here, that same comedic timing and comedic delivery that the original film does? You know, why is this film not that funny? And I think it's because a lot of the comedic delivery is stale, and the timing with all the comedic moments is all over the place. Comedic moments which are thrown randomly in the film in some parts. I just didn't really get in parts what I was meant to find funny and what I wasn't meant to find funny and where I was meant to laugh. I didn't find it that funny, which was a big thing because the original Mean Girls film is hilarious. This film, I think I chuckled 3 times, and the 3 times I chuckled was when Tina Fey was on screen, and that's because she's funny. Everybody else, I didn't find funny, you know. And the acting is not bad. The acting is not bad at all, you know. The main star of the film, what's her name? Angor Rice. Apologies if I mispronounced her name there. She plays Katie in this film. You know, the role that Lindsay Lohan played in the original. She does a good job. I really liked her in The Nice Guys. I'm pretty sure she played the young girl in that. The Nice Guys is a brilliant film, by the way. Check that out if you haven't already. She's really great in that. She had a fun supporting role in the Tom Holland Spider-Man films, and she was good in Mare of Easttown, and she's good here. She wasn't magnetic, though. You know, unlike Renee Rapp as Regina George, the role that Rachel McAdams played in the original, she is magnetic. Every time she's on screen, she's trying her best. But these performances didn't really stand out to me that much. They're enjoyable performances, and you can see they're trying their best. But I felt that at times the actors were miscast, and I felt that they made the film less believable to me. I found that they made the film more inauthentic. You know, some of the actors, and I don't want to criticize acting too much because I know it's a really difficult thing from what I've heard from people online, but I felt that the acting made this film feel less real, and it made it feel more like a stage production, which leads me on to problem number 3. The film just feels like a stage production. It doesn't feel like a film, which I think is its biggest crime, because it can be transported well. You know, like I've already mentioned, Hairspray is quite successful, and I haven't seen the producer's remake, which starred, Matthew Broderick. I haven't seen that for a long while, but when I first watched it, I remember really enjoying it. So I think it can be done well. And there's plenty of other examples that I'm not thinking off the top of my head right now. But it can be done well, is the point I'm making. And I don't think this is done well. The sets almost feel like, they're going to be changed any moment, like you get in a stage production. And it felt like Howard Henry the movie, is what he said. It felt like Howard Henry the movie, where although not as bad, obviously, but it felt like it was a stage production, and that it still is a stage production, just now it's being made into a film. There isn't enough being changed. There isn't enough to justify its existence in the film format. It was fine, though. It's absolutely fine, and the film does have a funny support performance that I didn't find too funny, but I liked what he was going for. It has a enjoyable to watch supporting performance from John Hamm, and it was weird. It was slightly jarring watching John Hamm in this film after just finishing Fargo season 5 recently, where he plays a very, very evil character, a character which you really hate, and the way you're meant to in that season. It was very jarring, well, not very jarring, but it was slightly jarring watching him in this film. Like, okay, he's playing a very different character, and it shows a range of John Hamm. And I like John Hamm in this film. He's barely in it, but I liked when he was in it. And again, you can see what they're going for. It's made with the best intentions, and clearly, I'm not the target audience of this film. Clearly, I get that. But I would argue that I'm not the target audience for the original Mean Girls film, or not the target audience for Barbie, which this film seems to be trying to attract the same audience to. But I loved Barbie. On a rewatch, I loved that film. It was my 9th favourite film of 2023. And the original Mean Girls film, as I keep saying, I watched it for the first time last year. Really, really liked it. I'd probably even say I loved it, in fact. One of the best comedies I've seen in recent memory. And so, the point I'm making with that is, all film should be able to appeal to people worldwide, regardless of who it's directed to. Regardless of who these films are aimed at. They should be able to work for everybody. Mean Girls didn't work for me. This version of Mean Girls didn't work for me. Even though it's not aimed at me, look at the stuff behind me. Even though it's clearly not aimed at someone like me, it still should be able to work for me, though. If it's a good film, then it would have worked for me. But for me, I didn't believe in any of it. It felt like a stage production. It was unfunny for the most part. And when I say for the most part, I think about 90% of the film is just not that funny. And it's actually a bit painful to watch in parts, because of how unfunny some of the jokes are, and because you get some of the actors waiting, for the audience to laugh. I hate when that happens in a film, when an actor says something and they pause after delivering the line because they think there's going to be laughing in the cinema. But I was sat in a cinema which wasn't full or anything, but it had some people in, and they didn't laugh at it either. In fact, someone yawned at one point, which I found more funny than anything in the film, I've got to admit. And that was somebody who the film was aiming at. That was somebody who I would consider the target audience of this film. And, my cinema is not everybody's cinema, clearly, I know that. But still, I did find it funny that people who were probably more the target audience weren't enjoying this film too much. And I'm not really sure why it exists, other than to try and cash in on the Mean Girls IP and to try and recapture that magic of the original Mean Girls film. But I don't think it does that. It also has some very weird meta jokes in there. I'm not going to give anything away, although it has been publicised, so I could say it. What I will say? Lindsay Lohan, who played Katie, the protagonist in the original Mean Girls film, she makes a cameo in this film, and there's some meta jokes when she makes a cameo that don't really work. Same with Tina Fey. I get what they're going for, but the meta jokes just came off as more forced than I was, than you would hope they would. It's a fine film, and I didn't hate it, but I can't recommend it. And I can't believe this too. I found it boring. I hate using that word, but I did find it slightly boring to watch in the cinema. Yeah, it's fine. And so, for that reason, I'm going to say that it's a... I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10. I didn't like it. It wasn't for me. And yes, I'm clearly not the target audience. I get that. Look at everything behind me. Look at the t-shirt I'm wearing today. I clearly understand that I'm not the target audience for this film. But I'm not the target audience for the original Mean Girls film or Barbie. And I liked those films to love those films quite a lot. Especially Barbie on a rewatch. What a brilliant film. And this film is clearly trying to attract the same sort of audience that Barbie had, and I do not think it will succeed. It is absolutely fine, and I'm kind of bored talking about it now, and you're probably bored hearing me talk about it, because how long has the podcast been going on for? That's right, over 25 minutes. So I'm going to round things off by saying that this version of Mean Girls wasn't for me. The musical numbers, they look great. Well, they don't look great, but they look decent enough. But the songs aren't catchy. There's no reason for it to really exist, in my opinion. Please give me a reason in the comment section below. If you've got a better reason, if you've got a reason you think this movie should exist, then let me know in the comment section below. But I don't think it's been transported from stage musical production to film, to the film format particularly well. I don't think it's been adapted particularly well. Also, it's not that funny, and I didn't believe in any of it. I didn't believe in any of this film, and I didn't think the acting was particularly great, with a couple of exceptions. But you know, it wasn't for me. Let's just say that. Let's finish off this podcast now. Let's just say it wasn't for me, and I thought it was fine. And so, all in all, I'm gonna say once more that Mean Girls is a 3 out of 10 from me. Anyway, guys, that's it for this podcast for today. I think I've even been in a little bit of a weird mood doing this podcast because I'm so tired. I was recording this on a Friday and not having a great sleep last night. But nevertheless, hopefully you enjoyed my review of Mean Girls, and please let me know your thoughts on this version of Mean Girls in the comment section below. Let me know your thoughts on the original version of Mean Girls in comparison to this film. And by the way, in case you haven't guessed, I do not think this version of Mean Girls holds a candle to the original version. But anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching or listening to this podcast. And if you haven't yet, please click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast. Bloody hell, that's so loud now. And I suppose I will see you guys again soon. But bye for now. Bye.